All right, here we go. So today we're going to talk about useful insights from your data, in particular your project management tools. Virtually every organization uses project management tool to organize their work as well as get it done. We're going to explain the non-native integration methods that we use here at Alooma to ingest data. Specifically, we're going to highlight the Alooma REST reader and how it works, and kind of dive into some of the advantages and disadvantages. Then we'll get into the fun stuff with Daniel and run through a live demo to show you how we can use the Alooma REST reader to work with two of the most popular project management tools, Jira and Asana. Specifically, we're going to look at ingesting these data sources and piping them into Snowflake. Then we'll wrap up with a summary and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. All right, so up on the screen, you'll see that we pulled out some of the top project management tools. There has been a huge surge in project management software. Underlying it all is the basic need for teams to plan and manage and track all of their work while making sure communication is clear. One of the trends contributing to this big rise of project management apps is the non-software teams, like marketing, is adopting IT project management processes like Agile, Scrum, and Kanban. For example, here at Alooma, our marketing team uses a Kanban style process in Trello to manage our marketing tasks and Basecamp to manage our design work. And there are hundreds of examples of this throughout the world. Of course, as an organization, you use more project management tools and apps, the more valuable company data lives inside of them. The challenge with this is there just creates more data silos. Naturally, many tools come with their own analytics reports, but simply that might just not be enough. If you're trying to pull out specific insights that reports don't provide, you're stuck. Or if you want to marry your project management data with other data, you just can't, unless you get the data out and unify it in one place. This makes it very difficult to discover hidden relationships between project management and functions like product and engineering or marketing and sales. For example, your sales team might want to know if more product releases increases sales, or if the product team may want to know how fixing more bugs affects customer support tickets. This is why we built the Alooma Data Pipeline platform, to break down these data silos. We do this by enabling seamless data integration from nearly any data source to virtually any data warehouse. Once all of your valuable data is unified, it becomes easy to perform impactful analysis on your preferred BI tool or run something interesting doing machine learning or AI. Of course, we offer native integrations with many of our most popular data sources. However, in this webinar, we're going to focus on non-native ways to integrate the most popular data sources that we might not have native integrations for. I'm now going to hand it over to Daniel to give a high-level overview of these different methods before he dives into the live demo. Daniel?
Thank you, Tasha. So, so we can see over here we got API, webhooks, and custom data sources that we're going to talk about, and basically break down each one, how it works, and what are the pros and cons that we see that Alooma sees with each one of those. So with the API readers, basically how it works is we fetch data via REST APIs, process the response, and pass it down the pipeline as we do pretty much with any other integration, and then basically load it all the way through to building the tables in the data warehouse, maintaining the schemas, and writing the data continuously to the data warehouse. Basically, the con with that sort of reader or integration is that if you got something that requires a more complex authentication flow, then it's not natively supported, basically. There are workarounds around it, but natively, OAuth, for example, an OAuth authentication flow would not be supported. The second method would be using webhooks. So basically, how it works is that Alooma would generate an HTTP endpoint for you with a unique security token, available to receiving data via HTTP post, basically. The pros is that you don't need to maintain an additional web service in your infrastructure. Basically, you get real-time data. What does that mean? If we take, for example, something like MailChimp or Mandrill, right? You can set up webhook triggers as soon as either the user clicked on an email or your marketing campaign had shipped. you get that data instantly into Alooma and into your data warehouse. The cons is basically the response format. So if your webhook were to output via XML or needed SOAP or OAuth contract in the middle, that flow is not currently supported, but also is not super common, if we put it out there. And when we say custom data sources, what do we mean exactly? We mean, anything from file storage inputs like FTP, SFTP, S3, Azure Blob Storage, Google Cloud Storage, all the common ones, and even the non-common ones that are on-premise folks. Basically, we can ingest anything from JSON lines, arrays, CSVs, TSVs, any sort of delimited files, Avro, and really the list goes on over there. Basically, anything that's uploaded to one of those storage inputs, we can ingest pretty much in near real time. The pros, common workflows already upload those stuff into those storage inputs, right? If you're using, for example, Greenhouse uploads all the data directly into S3. Alooma can monitor that S3 bucket or prefix and load the data in real time without needing any additional setup. The cons, honestly, there isn't one. Maybe there's one that I can come up with. S3, for example, has a limitation where listing or prospecting a bucket prefix or an entire bucket where there's multiple files, and we're talking about tens of millions of files, takes a while. That's a known limitation, and everybody runs into it all the time. We have some workarounds around that as well. If someone's interested, please talk to us. Alrighty. However, today we want to focus talking about Alooma's REST API reader. So what does that mean exactly? The REST API reader basically is a component in Alooma that runs GET or POST requests to a specific endpoint with a set of either credentials or URL parameters or headers. We take that response, we attach some metadata into it. For example, what is the endpoint that it came from, what time it came in through the system, and then where it's going in the data warehouse. We would ingest that for you, either with a pagination key that either gives us how many responses we have to paginate over, either by date or just pretty much any pagination key that API supports. The main advantages are, if you take Jira, for example, you don't need to build an integration. You don't have to write any custom code. All you have to do is authenticate, say what project you want to pick, boom, done. You're going to have that data in your data warehouse ready for analytics to go wild on in minutes, basically. What else do we have over here? Disadvantages. As we mentioned earlier, the limited authentication flows, such as OAuth or contracts via SOAP, that's currently not supported. Limited workflow possibilities basically goes the same with authentication. When we say workflow, you can actually, if you take the response and then you need to run another response, that is possible through Alooma. It's a little bit of a workaround, but it is possible. Alrighty. Jira. All right. So today we're going to show you how to get data from project management software, basically from Jira and Asana. If you aren't familiar with any of them, Jira is a popular software project management tool for agile teams to either run Scrum or Kanban fashion. And Asana is a popular project management and workflow tracking tool for any team work for marketing, product development, and even fundraising. Cool. Before we jump into demos, we'd like to highlight the power of integrating your project management data from Jira and Asana with other software apps you might use. Many of our customers get real value of their data by joining it with other data to produce insights to make better data-driven decisions. Here's some of the ideas of how you can mix Jira and Asana data with other popular tools like Zendesk, GitHub, Intercom, or even Delighted, which, if you don't know, is an NPS tool, basically. Let's jump into the fun stuff, shall we? For the purpose of today's demo, we'll showcase a simple example of quickly going from data ingestion to insight from each source. Basically, for Jira demo, our goal would be to calculate the distribution of cycle time of issues or the day, basically how long it took from a ticket's been opened to a ticket closed. if we put it bluntly. Alrighty. Demo. Alrighty, 1 second. We're gonna switch to the Alooma platform, then we're gonna do a little demo setting up Jira. Our Snowflake demo system over here, where we can see multiple data sources going into Snowflake. And then what we're going to show is how we set up a Jira connection via the REST API reader. So we're going to click on Add New Inputs. You can see all the storage inputs, for example, that I was talking about earlier: FTP, SFTP, Google Cloud Storage, S3, Azure Blob Storage, even Box or Google Drive, if you have stuff over there. And what we're going to do is basically go for the REST reader, which I believe should be at the bottom. And there we are. REST API, import data from a specific REST endpoint. Right on. So I'm going to give this input or integration a logical name, basically. And then the API URL, which in our case is a Jira URL, so it starts with an HTTPS. And we're using a get method, and we have a user and password over here of one of the users. There we go. Now the password over here. Great. Our pagination type is none, basically. And we're going to add 2 things. We're going to add a URL parameter over here. So our URL parameter is basically going to be a JQL query, and hence why we're using the search endpoint on Jira. So what we want to do is we're going to say, for this project, basically our project name is SAM, and this is what we're going to do. So parameter is, the type of the parameter is text, but it is JQL. And then the value would be over here, basically project equals SAM. So if you were to do that in your browser, basically you can do that too. So you'd hit that search API, and then your URL parameters would basically be JQL, right? And then project equals SAM. And our data field, so the component that we want to ingest from the SAM project is issues. So we're going to say that our data field over here is basically going to be issues. Alrighty. And then we can also tell the input, hey, do I have any other headers I want to push in there? How often do I want the integration to be pulled? I'm just going to leave it on 30 minutes because I don't need it really more often than that. And then I'm just going to do create inputs. All right. So we should see data flowing in a minute or even less. Let's go to the input over here. All righty. I'm going to see that it's been pulled before, but there should be data coming in a second. Yeah, basically what's happening right now is that on the first verification stage, Alooma basically verifies, hey, can we connect? Are we getting a 200 OK, or are we getting a 401? Are we authorized? If authentication works and everything goes well, then as you've seen, we're going to complete the input setup. And basically, what's going to happen is data is going to start flowing. So if we take a look at, let's look at the input graph and have a now. So we can see that 10:18, this is Pacific time. We basically just got about 25 events over here. And the samples take a few more minutes to basically show up. But what you can see is an example of what such a sample would look like. So let's grab on that one and see. So if we look over here, we can see this is all this is everything we get when pulling data from. So we got our custom fields. We can tell when a ticket was closed, the URLs, the avatars, so the people who basically worked on that project or that issue. What is the URL for the ticket and the project? Description for each issue that is in that project as well. Names, pretty much anything that we can get is what we can see over here in the sample page. Let's see if we've got. If we do this, all right. Yep, Jira. this one, that one. Cool. All right, so once we've got the events, basically, we have all the JIRA data. If it's Snowflake, we can either push it to a variant column, so push the entire thing into variant. If you want to say, hey, I don't need a schema right now, or I'd rather to have this JIRA data or Asana data remain semi-structured, and only when I analyze, I want to decide what the schema is. Alooma has you covered on that. We basically would automatically load it as variant unless it was flattened through something like our transformation code engine. All right, so we took a look at the sample. We kind of know what the data looks like with all our custom fields and our base URL. And if you remember, I was talking about the metadata attributes that Alooma attaches to, it's easier to track when and where the data came from. So for example, what's the base URL, what's a timestamp. Alooma maintains a schema URL, and each record that goes in through the platform also gets its own UUID, so you can differentiate different records even if you had to pull the same record twice, for example. All right. So let's go ahead and see what that sort of data would look like in a data warehouse. So if we go to Alooma's mapper screen, basically, and say, hey, show me what the JIRA data looks like. This would be a visualization of the schema that's currently set up in Snowflake. So if we look at it, what we got labels, we've got creators, our different custom fields, which unfortunately have their name because this is how the JIRA API brings them back. But they can always be overridden if you have the mapping through the code engine before they're loaded into the data warehouse. Issue links, that would probably be in just a string array and an ID that JIRA provides. Votes, apparently JIRA has that feature too, I didn't know. Priority for the tickets, time spent on the ticket, what's the current progress. As you see, we can also load different nodes within the same JSON into a variant column. So we can also always differentiate between something that's already flattened and something that needs to be flattened or needs to be loaded as variant. You got your updated, so what timestamp would note time zone, but it's basically always UTC. And then your subtasks. Basically, anything that you need to know about what happened to a JIRA issue at any point in time exists and is available for free through the JIRA API, whether it's a hosted one or whether you host it yourselves. Let's touch a little bit about what happens if your warehouse is paused or any of your data warehouses are unavailable either for resizing purposes or whatever, or if somebody recalls when US East S3 was down this year, I believe that might have happened once or twice, and we can't basically upload the data or load it, ingest it into a data warehouse, then what happens, right? You don't want to lose the data. We don't want you to lose your data either. So what Alooma has is something that we would call the Restream Queue. And the Restream Queue basically says, hey, I couldn't load this record into Snowflake. I'm going to put it here for you to basically take a look and see what happens. Now, when your warehouse or S3 or any other data warehouse does become available, Alooma does automatically try to reload or replay that data with maintaining ordering in the data warehouse, of course. And we try several times with an exponential backoff, basically, because we don't want to bomb your data warehouse, especially if you're having trouble with it. There's a max retransmit times. We try about 15 times with various intervals, but that's about it. You have the option either through the UI or the API to A, replay that data at any point in time, or B, purge that data, say, hey, I don't need this data anymore. I'm good with purging it. Another thing that you can do with it is take it to our transformation engine and work on it. Maybe let's see how that looks. So we're going to grab one of those samples, and we're going to take it to the code engine. And what that means is basically I have a sample over here, and that's what I've seen on the Restream Queue, and I can write code on it. It's basically already a Python dictionary, so I don't have to really work hard to parse it. So it's already a Python dictionary. I can load whatever I need to JSON form as well if I want it to be variant or Snowflake array or object. That works as well. If I wanted to say, hey, here's a conditional, if this record, for example, came from the JIRA input, but it came on the specific day when I know that my data is bad, I can say, hey, discard all those rows, right? And that would be a simple Python conditional. If anyone is familiar with any sort of programming language, it's really a simple if that you can run in there. And if you're not sure how to do that, the Alooma team is here for you to do that, basically. All right, so let's see. So in closing, more project management tools have created more data silos. A modern ETL can help break down these barriers, basically break down the silos, put everything in one central repository of data that everybody can query and get insights from. The Alooma REST reader basically opens up a lot more possibilities when working with such data sources. The process of integration to analysis can be done basically in those three easy steps, right? So one, we had set up the Alooma REST reader to read data from Jira. Done. That took us about, what, 3 clicks? Next thing you know, you're going to have your tables and data already showing up because Alooma automatically infers types, creates tables, and streams data over. And from then, it's basically a matter of just querying the data. That's all you got to do.
Great. Thanks so much, Daniel. If you haven't done so already, send us your questions in the chat panel, and we can get started with some questions that have already come in. So, Daniel, what if my REST APIs return an XML response? How does Alooma handle that?
That is a great question, Tasha. What happens is Alooma will basically say, hey, we can get the data, but we couldn't parse it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that XML string into a message attribute in the dictionary, and basically you can see that in the sample. And then using any basically XML library, we can help you parse it through the code engine and then flatten it or load it into JSON form.
Great. Okay, another question. I know that we just spent this webinar talking about Jira and Asana, but what other integrations do you support with REST API?
Oh, that's a great question, actually. Anything from Recurly to MailChimp and Shopify, basically.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so another question, more around the OAuth. So I think you said that the REST reader doesn't support OAuth. Like, how does Alooma support authentication?
So that's a great question, Tasha. Basically, for things that require OAuth and are very popular, such as the Google Marketing Suite, Google Analytics, Google AdWords, that's where we would leverage basically Alooma's native integration. So a user would have to do basically just basic OAuth flow. You just 3 clicks, authenticate your Google user, and just pick the report you want to run.
And how does, like, if from your experience, why would you choose a REST reader over a webhook?
So it's a good question, Tasha. Basically, some of the webhooks give you partial data, whereas with the REST API reader, when you access directly to a specific endpoint, you can actually get very much a wholesome data set. Like campaigns through webhooks. Some of the mail provider campaigns don't give you all the full data set through webhooks, and that's because they send the data. If you get the data yourself, that usually gets you the entire data set.
Okay, it looks like we have time for maybe just 1 or 2 more questions. Looks like there's some people typing. Maybe we can talk about, oh, it looks like, here we go. So how does Alooma offer a free trial? Like, how can someone try this?
Alooma does offer a free trial where you basically get $400 worth of credits, $400 or $500 worth of credits to start with. If anyone's familiar with the Snowflake business model, it's very, very similar. We do provide the trial where you can actually go ahead and see that for yourself.
Great. And it looks like someone would like to take a look at the Jira input settings page again.
Okay.
Can you maybe just do a quick recap over that?
Sure thing. There we go. So we've got the input name that we gave it, and we've got the Jira API URL that we're heading right over here. the method, which is get, the user and password. Pagination type we have over here is none, and how to set up for a specific project is that way the endpoint parameters are basically JQL, and then project equals the name of the project you want to get, where the type is basically text, and that's the default that we set up in the UI. And the data field that we get from there is issues. And again, this is optional. You can also get all the data for a specific project if you want to.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. And on behalf of Daniel and the rest of the Alooma team, we want to thank everyone. And we really did enjoy this conversation. We look forward to having you again on future Alooma webinars. I will send out the recording of today's presentation along with the slides. Hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.